Hi, I'm Vicki Stark, and I'm the author of Runaway Husbands. I'm here to help you if you're struggling to recover from wife abandonment syndrome. I know when my marriage ended, it completely came out of the blue. My husband came home from work one night, and I said to him, I bought fish. And he said, it's over. And I said, fine, you don't want fish? I'll make chicken. And he said, no, it's over. The marriage is over, and I'm moving out right now. So obviously, that was a tremendously traumatic experience for me, and it totally came out of the blue. And as a result of that experience, I started researching wife abandonment and found out that hundreds, thousands of women have experienced exactly the same thing, and weirdly, in exactly the same form. So I developed this idea of the 10 hallmarks of wife abandonment syndrome. And they don't, if you're looking at the way your marriage ended, and this isn't exactly the way your marriage ended, it doesn't mean that you haven't experienced wife abandonment syndrome. You don't have to click off all 10 of them in order to fit the criterion. But it'll give you an idea of what it's like when your marriage ends suddenly out of the blue and everything, your whole reality as you knew it, starts to shift. So the number one hallmark of wife abandonment syndrome is that prior to your husband leaving, he seemed to have been an engaged, involved spouse. You saw him as honest and trustworthy, more or less. And in many cases, the man is like the pillar of the community, a very devoted husband, a very loving father, and has given really no indication that there's something else going on in his mind that you have no idea about. So that's the first hallmark of wife abandonment syndrome. So the second one is that he never sat you down and said, you know what, I'm really unhappy and I'm thinking of leaving and this isn't working for me and we need help and we have to work on something. He never gave you that opportunity to work on the relationship and to try to turn things around. So that very often in wife abandonment syndrome, the news that the marriage is over comes completely out of the blue, as I described in my own story. And without him ever having, broached the topic and discussed it with you. Number three is that he typically blurts it out in the middle of some mundane conversation. Like you're saying, like I said, I bought fish, and he says the marriage is over. Or somebody says, do you want to go to the market on Sunday morning? And he says, I can't do this anymore. It often comes in the oddest of times where you don't have any indication that something's coming, and it's sort of like he screws up all of his courage and then just sort of releases it on you when you least expect it. So that's the third hallmark of wife abandonment syndrome. Number four is that the reasons that he gives are often weird. They're often strange reasons to end a long-term marriage, sometimes a marriage of 20, 30, 40 years. And he, like one woman said, he said that she left too many crumbs on the counter, or she didn't put her shoes away by the front door, or these reasons that just don't add up, that are just bewildering, extremely confusing, and don't seem to be of the magnitude that would explain why somebody would walk out of a long-term marriage. Number five, by the time the husband reveals his intentions to his wife, typically it's already a fait accompli. Like, for example, in my case, I said I bought fish. He said the marriage is over. He threw his stuff into garbage bags and moved in with his girlfriend. And there was really nothing that I could have said. I realized, because I was already, I'd been a marriage counselor for 25 years at that point. I realized that there was nothing I could have done. And in most cases, the men are not interested in talking about anything, and the decision has been made and they're out of there. In other cases, they stay around for a while, but in staying around, they're not genuinely working on the marriage. They're just sort of keeping their options open until they're definitely sure they want to leave. Number six, the husband's behavior changes radically, so much so that to the wife, he seems to have morphed into an angry, cruel stranger. So this is often these men who are so attentive and so caring and so loving, and then they suddenly are angry and blaming and diminishing anything that the wife does or has done in the course of the marriage. Number 7, the husband shows no remorse. Rather, he blames the wife and may describe himself as the victim. And certainly that's something that my husband said. And that was completely bewildering when he said, I'm the victim here. And I'm like, wait a minute, how does that add up? But very often the husbands are angry and they show absolutely no remorse. And one question women often ask me is that over time, do they sort of wake up and start to show that remorse? And the answer that I have, unfortunately, is no, that it's very, very rare. You know, obviously in some cases that happens, but in the many, many, let's say thousands of women that I've talked to over the years, almost no men have ever come back and said, I'm sorry, and you didn't deserve this. Number 8, in almost all cases, the husband has been having an affair and typically will move in with the girlfriend either immediately within the first couple of days, within the first week, or if he has stayed around for a number of months, eventually, you know, it will become clear that there's another woman on the scene. That's pretty common in 99% of the cases. Number 9, the husband makes no attempt to help his wife, either financially or emotionally, as if all positive regard for her has been extinguished. So that's also completely bewildering, you know, that the husband now suddenly is, you know, trying to undermine her very security. And even in cases where men are financially secure, they don't seem to be open-handed and giving and willing to make it easy for the wife. Typically, it's not always the case, but that's a very common hallmark of wife abandonment syndrome. And finally, number 10, systematically devaluing the marriage, the husband denies what he had previously described as the positive aspects of the marriage. So, you know, for example, my husband had said when we had renovated our house, he said, oh, I love this house so much. I will, you know, they're going to have to take me out feet first. And then when he leaves, he says, I never liked this house. And we're like, whoa, you know, like, how does that happen? And so that very often in the leaving, the men completely devalue those issues, you know, that they had talked about previously, where they had seemed very positive about things, where they described, remember that trip we took and I loved that trip. And then when they're leaving, they say, I hated that trip. It was never any fun and I never enjoyed traveling with you. So these sort of give you a flavor of what wife abandonment syndrome is all about. And, you know, again, I just want to repeat that even if you don't meet all the criteria, it doesn't mean that you're not suffering. And it doesn't mean that you're not struggling to recognize your life, to get your life back on track. But we can help you. The Runaway Husbands community is here for you. I'm here for you. And we're all devoted in trying to help you and help other women who've gone through this move on from this trauma and rebuild their lives and start to access a new normal, a new reality that you can create that will make it nice in your future. So tell me your thoughts about what we're talking about. Leave me a comment below, and I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. And that's it for today.